By now, you have probably gotten your California voter information guide in the mail for the June primary. And to talk a little bit about what we're seeing on the ballot is KCBS political reporter Doug Sovern. Doug, let's break down some of the hottest races, starting off with the Attorney General.
Yeah, how often do you say that? This is the hot race, Attorney General. But the fact is, Governor and U.S. Senator, there's really not much of a campaign there. It's going to be, Gavin Newsom and Alex Padilla walking into the November general and heavily favored to be reelected then. But the Attorney General race is really a tough fight. You've got Rob Bonta, who is an appointed AG to replace Kamala Harris. He was never a prosecutor. He's a career lawmaker. And he's got some pretty stiff challengers and a real fight among really three people trying to get that second spot. Two Republicans, Eric Early and Nathan Hochman, and one former Republican turned independent, the Sacramento DA Anne Marie Schubert, and they're going to be going tooth and nail for that second spot. And, they're attacking Bonta on crime, but they're also attacking each other. And of course, choice with the Roe v. Wade opinion looming is going to be a big factor here. And it's a real scrap to get that second spot. And you're going to be seeing a lot of ads and getting a lot of things in the mail pushing those three as one of them tries to make it into the top two, presumably with Bonta.
Okay, as you mentioned, the top two, because the top two are going to go on to the big election in November. We're just narrowing it down with this one. Now, speaking of, let's talk about this race for controller, because you said, who thinks that AG is going to be the biggest race? Who thinks controller is going to be a big race?
Right.
But we've seen several television ads about this, so it looks like it's pretty hot.
Who even knows what the controller does, right? They send you those checks if you're lucky enough to get a refund. But we have a treasurer and we have a controller. The controller, is responsible for spending money. But you've got no incumbent because the incumbent's termed out. So you have three different Democrats who are making a play for this. And then you have a pretty viable Republican, Lan Hee Chen, who's a Stanford professor who's up and coming and quite eloquent and articulate, a smart guy. And so when you have three Democrats fighting for that vote, which you remember Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1 in this state, the Republican is likely to squeak through there, right? Because he's going to presumably get most of the Republican votes. So he's got a good shot at the top two and advancing to November, while the others, the LA controller and Steve Glazer and Malia Cohen, fight it out for that Democratic spot. Although it's still possible that two of them will get through and Chen won't make it. It'll be Democrat on Democrat in November. But it seems more likely it'll be one of the Dems versus Chen. And so, again, it's a really competitive race. That's why you're seeing TV ads. That's why it's going to get a lot more attention than usual.
Now, explain to us, if you will, some voters are a little confused because we're seeing Senator Padilla's name twice on the ballot.
Yeah, and that's not the only case. In some legislative races, some congressional districts, you're going to see the same people running twice. All right, so what's going on here is we've had a number of seats, including his, where someone was appointed. He was appointed to replace Kamala Harris. So when I mentioned Bonta replacing Kamala Harris, I think I said that. He obviously was to replace Javier Becerra, who replaced Kamala Harris. So Padilla was appointed to the Senate to replace Kamala Harris. And so he has to run now for the right to finish the rest of her term, which runs through this year. So the last 6 months of her term. So he's on the ballot for that. He's got opponents. Mark Muser is the Republican from San Francisco. But then he's also running for his own full 6-year term in his own right, starting in November, or actually next January, but for the full seat. And so he's got opponents there. So you're voting twice. You'll see who should finish out this rest of Kamala Harris's term and who should be our next U.S. senator. So he's on there twice. And that's also true where some state lawmakers have retired or left their office early or gone on to some other job. Someone's running, and this is also true, for example, for Devin Nunes running for Congress in the Fresno area. He left office prematurely. So someone has to fill the seat for the rest of this term and then run in the new district. And of course, there's new districts because we just had redistricting, so that's even more confusion. The numbers have changed. So yeah, you may get a ballot, as many of us have, that has at least Padilla on there twice for 2 Senate campaigns, and maybe also a local race as well. It makes sense. It's there for a reason. It's 2 separate races, and you got to vote twice, or not, but you should vote twice.
Now, talk a little bit about this whole appointee process. You've mentioned several people that are now holding state offices, were people that were appointed to these offices. How much of an advantage does that give them over other people that are running just fresh off the bat?
You're an incumbent. I mean, if you've already got the job, as Padilla has for almost 2 years now, a year and a half. You're an incumbent. Now, you're not an elected incumbent, so you're technically not running for re-election. You're running for election for the first time to this job. But you hold the office and you've had time to do something and show that you can do it. So that's true for Alex Padilla as a U.S. Senator. It's true in some congressional districts, in some legislative districts. In San Francisco, obviously, there's a number of, been a rash of appointees to vacated positions, a lot of real shuffle there as well. And there's a lot of new faces because of redistricting, because of retirements. There are a lot of new faces. So having some recognition already, having some track record with the voters where they at least know your name and that you're in this job and it says U.S. Senator or whatever the position is on the ballot is a huge advantage, just in terms of name recognition, party support, fundraising, you name it.
All right. Any other thoughts on the June primary coming up, Doug?
Well, of course, we've got the Chesa Boudin recall in San Francisco. That's going to be driving people there. It's going to be interesting to see how many more people go to the polls because of the Roe v. Wade opinion, which will probably come out a couple weeks after primary day. We've got a new CBS News poll that shows about 1 out of 3 people thinks that's going to make them more likely to vote. So we could see higher turnout, not just in November, but here in June. We could see higher turnout from people just motivated to get out and make their voices heard and make clear how they feel about the prospect of Roe v. Wade being overturned, and Democrats twice as likely as Republicans to do that. So there could be a surge in Democrats voting in June in California. We'll have to see.
All right, very good. KCBS political reporter Doug Sovern, we appreciate your perspective today.
Thank you, Ann. Always good to be with you. See you in a couple weeks.